Jake Morrison sat in the captain's chair of his cargo ship New Dawn and stared at the medical report on his screen. His hands shook as he read the words again. His 6-year-old daughter Lucy was dying slowly from malnutrition, and there was nothing the alien doctors could do about it. The attack had happened 3 months ago when space pirates hit their convoy near the Jupiter mining stations. Most ships escaped, but the New Dawn took heavy damage to their food systems. The synthesizers that made their meals were completely destroyed, and spare parts were impossible to find this far from Earth. Jake had tried everything. He bought expensive, alien food supplements from every station they visited, but Lucy kept getting thinner. Her bright blue eyes had lost their sparkle, and she barely had energy to play anymore. The alien doctors on the medical stations all said the same thing. Human digestive systems were too primitive, and they did not understand how to help. The reptilian doctor on Kepler Station had been especially blunt. "Your species requires specific nutrients that our science cannot replicate," he had said with cold yellow eyes. "We suggest you return to your homeworld before the child expires." But Earth was 6 months away, and Lucy might not survive the journey. Jake had already lost his wife Maria in a mining accident 2 years ago. He could not lose Lucy too. She was all he had left in this vast empty galaxy. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at his crew roster. His engineer Ben was human, but the rest were aliens. 2 saurian reptiles named Crix and Voth worked in the engine room, while 3 insect-like Chithan handled cargo operations. They were good workers, but they did not understand human needs. The ship's computer chimed with an incoming message. Jake's first officer Ben walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad. Ben was a thin man with gray hair who had served with Jake for 5 years. He was also the closest thing Lucy had to an uncle. "Captain, I found something," Ben said with excitement in his voice. "There's a human baker working on the trade hub here. Her name is Claire Adams, and she's been helping other human ships with food problems." Jake looked up with hope for the first time in weeks. "A baker? What can she do that the medical stations cannot?" Ben showed him the data pad with reviews from other ship captains. "Look at these reports, Jake. Humans who eat her bread recover from malnutrition faster than those using alien supplements. Some say her food has healing properties." Jake read the testimonials with growing amazement. Captain Pete Williams of the cargo ship Blue Sky wrote that Claire's bread saved his crew after their food ran out during a long-haul mission. Another captain named Linda Garcia said Claire's cooking helped her son recover from a wasting sickness that alien medicine could not cure. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. "It's just bread." "I don't know, but desperate times call for desperate measures," Ben replied. "Should I try to contact her?" Jake thought about Lucy sleeping in her small cabin. She had barely eaten anything in days, and her clothes hung loose on her tiny frame. If there was even a small chance this baker could help, he had to try. "Yes, contact her immediately," Jake said. "Offer her whatever she wants." Ben sent the message, and they waited. An hour later, Claire Adams responded with a video call. Jake saw a woman in her early 30s with brown hair tied back and kind green eyes. She wore a simple white apron covered in flour. "Captain Morrison," she said with a gentle voice. "Ben told me about your daughter. I'm sorry to hear about her condition. Can you help her?" Jake asked directly. He was too worried to waste time with pleasantries. Claire nodded slowly. "I believe so. Human children need more than just calories to grow strong. They need food made with care and traditional methods that preserve nutrients alien systems destroy." "What do you charge for your services?" Jake asked. "Standard crew pay plus ingredients," Claire replied. "But I must warn you, Captain. I've heard about your routes through contested space. Are you sure you want a civilian aboard during dangerous runs?" Jake felt a moment of guilt. His cargo runs took them through areas where human ships were not welcome. Pirates and hostile aliens made every journey risky. But Lucy's life was worth any danger. "I can protect you," he said firmly. "My crew is experienced, and we've survived this long." Claire studied his face through the video link. She seemed to see something there that satisfied her. "Very well, Captain. I'll need 3 days to gather supplies and close my business here. Can you wait that long?" "Yes," Jake said with relief flooding through him. Thank you, Miss Adams. You may be saving my daughter's life. Call me Claire, she said with a warm smile, and I'll do everything I can for Lucy. After the call ended, Ben looked at Jake with concern. Are you sure about this? Taking a civilian into contested space is dangerous enough without adding someone Lucy might get attached to. Jake understood Ben's worry. Lucy had lost so many people already. Her mother's death had devastated the little girl, and she still had nightmares about it. If something happened to Claire, it might break Lucy completely. We don't have a choice, Ben, Jake said quietly. Without help, Lucy will die anyway. At least this way she has a chance. Ben nodded grimly. I'll prepare quarters for our new crew member. Should I tell the alien crew about her? Tell them we're bringing aboard a food specialist, Jake replied. They don't need to know more than that. Over the next 3 days, Jake found himself thinking about Claire Adams constantly. Her file showed she had worked on dozens of stations helping human crews and colonies. She had no family listed and no permanent address. It seemed she traveled from place to place helping wherever she was needed. Jake wondered what drove someone to live such a wandering life. Did she have losses of her own that made her want to help others? Or was she simply one of those rare people who found purpose in caring for strangers? On the 3rd day, Claire arrived at the docking bay with several large containers of supplies. Jake met her personally to welcome her aboard. She was smaller than he expected, with an easy smile and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Welcome to the new dawn, Jake said as he helped carry her equipment. Lucy is eager to meet you. I'm looking forward to meeting her too, Claire replied. Children are the reason I do this work, Captain. They deserve to grow up healthy and strong no matter where they are in the galaxy. As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the crew quarters, Jake felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope. Maybe this stranger with flour on her hands could work the miracle his daughter needed. Claire Adams stepped into the New Dawn's small galley and immediately began examining the equipment. The space was designed for basic food preparation, but most human ships relied on synthesizers rather than actual cooking. She ran her hands over the metal counters and checked the oven settings with the practiced eye of someone who had worked in dozens of different kitchens. This will do nicely, she said to Jake, who stood watching nervously in the doorway. The oven is old, but it holds heat well. That's what matters for proper bread. Jake nodded, though he did not really understand. When would you like to meet Lucy? She's resting in her cabin, but I could wake her. Let me get started first, Claire replied as she began unpacking her supplies. The smell of baking bread will bring her out when she's ready. Children are curious creatures. Claire's containers held ingredients Jake had never seen before. There were several types of flour in sealed bags with earth labels that must have cost a fortune to transport. She also had jars of honey, dried, fruits, nuts, and what looked like seeds. Everything was carefully organized and labeled by hand. Where did you get all this? Jake asked in amazement. Most stations only carry synthetic substitutes. I have contacts on human agricultural colonies throughout this sector, Claire explained as she measured flour into a large bowl. Real ingredients make all the difference, Captain. Synthetic copies lack the complex nutrients that human bodies need to truly thrive. Ben appeared in the galley doorway and watched Claire work with fascination. Behind him lurked Crix, one of the Saurian engineers. The reptilian alien's yellow eyes studied Claire's movements with obvious skepticism. Human cooking rituals are primitive, Crix hissed in his mechanical translator voice. Synthesized nutrition is more efficient and precise. Claire looked up from her mixing bowl with a patient smile. You're absolutely right that synthesizers are more efficient. But humans need more than just calories and vitamins. We need food that connects us to our culture and history. She continued mixing ingredients by hand rather than using the electric mixer. This flour comes from wheat grown on New Terra colony. The farmers there use seeds brought from Earth 3 generations ago. When I bake with it, I'm connecting with thousands of years of human tradition. Crix tilted his reptilian head in confusion. Emotional attachment to food sources is inefficient. It does not improve nutritional value. Doesn't it? Claire asked gently. Have you ever noticed how humans perform better when they're emotionally satisfied? How they work harder and heal faster when they feel connected to something larger than themselves? The Saurian engineer had no answer for that. He watched for a few more minutes as Claire kneaded dough with rhythmic motions, then wandered away, shaking his scaled head. "Don't mind Crix," Ben said with a grin. "He thinks humans are crazy, but he's worked with us long enough to respect our craziness." Claire laughed as she shaped the dough into loaves. "I've met his type before." Logic-based species often struggle to understand why emotional factors affect physical health, but they usually come around when they see the results. She placed the loaves in the oven and set the timer. Soon the galley filled with the warm, rich smell of baking bread. Jake had forgotten how wonderful real bread could smell. The synthesized versions never produced aromas like this. "How long before it's ready?" he asked. "Another hour for the first batch," Claire replied as she started preparing a second round of dough. "I'll make several different types. Growing children need variety in their diet." As if summoned by the smell, Lucy appeared in the galley doorway. Jake's heart clenched when he saw how thin she had become. Her favorite yellow dress hung loose on her small frame, and her blonde hair had lost its shine. But her blue eyes showed curiosity for the first time in weeks. "Daddy, what smells so good?" Lucy asked in a small voice. Claire immediately knelt down to Lucy's eye level with a warm smile. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Claire and I'm baking bread for you. Would you like to help me with the next batch?" Lucy looked at her father for permission. Jake nodded encouragingly and Lucy took a tentative step into the galley. "I don't know how to bake," Lucy said shyly. "That's all right, honey. I'll teach you," Claire replied. "Baking is like magic, but anyone can learn it. Would you like to see how flour turns into bread?" Lucy nodded and moved closer. Claire guided her small hands as they measured ingredients for a sweeter bread with honey and dried fruit. She explained each step in simple terms that made the process seem like an adventure rather than work. "Why do we need the dough?" Lucy asked as she pushed the sticky mixture around with her tiny fists. "Kneading helps all the ingredients become friends," Claire explained. "When they work together, they make something much better than any of them could make alone." Jake watched from the doorway, feeling something warm unfold in his chest. He had not seen Lucy smile in so long that he had almost forgotten how it lit up her entire face. Claire seemed to have a natural gift with children that went beyond just cooking skills. The timer chimed and Claire removed the first loaves from the oven. The bread was golden brown with a crispy crust that crackled as it cooled. She cut thick slices and spread them with real butter from her supplies. "Let's try some while it's still warm," she said, offering Lucy the first piece. Lucy bit into the bread and her eyes widened with surprise. "It tastes like sunshine," she said in wonder. Claire laughed delightedly. "That's the best compliment I've ever received. What do you think, Captain?" Jake took a bite and understood immediately why other captains had praised Claire's work. The bread was unlike anything he had tasted in years. It was hearty and satisfying, but also somehow comforting in a way that went beyond mere nutrition. "This is incredible," he said honestly. "How is it so different from regular bread?" "Time and care," Claire replied simply. "I let the dough rise, slowly, which develops complex flavors. The ingredients are chosen for both taste and nutrition, but most importantly, it's made with love for the people who will eat it." Over the following hours, crew members began appearing in the galley, drawn by the amazing smells. Even the alien crew members showed curiosity, though they could not eat human food safely. The 3 Chithan workers clicked their mandibles appreciatively when they smelled the bread. "Human food rituals produce pleasing aromas," one of them said, through its translator. "Perhaps there is purpose beyond nutrition." By evening, Claire had produced 6 different types of bread, plus a batch of sweet rolls that made Lucy giggle with delight. The little girl ate more in one day than she had in the previous week combined. "I feel better already," Lucy announced, as she cuddled against Claire during story time. "Can you teach me to make the sweet rolls tomorrow?" "Of course, sweetheart," Claire replied, stroking Lucy's hair. "Baking is more fun when you have a helper." That night, Jake tucked Lucy into bed and found her smiling peacefully for the first time in months. Her cheeks already looked less pale, and she seemed to have more energy. "Claire is nice, Daddy," Lucy said sleepily. "She makes the ship feel like home." As Jake turned off the lights, he realized Lucy was right. Something had changed aboard the New Dawn. The cold utilitarian corridors somehow felt warmer and more welcoming. The smell of fresh bread lingered everywhere, reminding the crew that they were more than just workers on a machine. They were humans carrying their culture and traditions with them among the stars. In her quarters, Claire unpacked her few personal belongings and prepared for bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear the ship's engines humming and the occasional conversation from passing crew members. For the first time in months, she felt like she might be exactly where she belonged. 2 weeks into their journey toward the Proxima mining colonies, Lucy Morrison was a different child. Her pale cheeks had gained color, and her thin frame was beginning to fill out. Most importantly, the light had returned to her blue eyes as she laughed and played throughout the ship's corridors. Claire watched the little girl carefully measure flour into a mixing bowl with intense concentration. They had established a daily routine of baking together after Lucy's lessons with the ship's educational computer. The galley had become their special place where flour dusted every surface, and the warm smell of rising bread filled the air. "Remember, to level the measuring cup," Claire instructed gently as Lucy scooped flour with serious determination. "Baking is like science. Every ingredient has to be exactly right or the magic doesn't work." "Like when Daddy navigates through the asteroid fields," Lucy said proudly. "He has to be exactly right too, or we crash into rocks." Claire smiled at the comparison. "That's a very good way to think about it, sweetheart. Your daddy and I both take care of the crew in different ways." From the galley doorway, Jake Morrison watched his daughter work with Claire and felt his heart swell with emotions he had not experienced since his wife died. Claire had not just saved Lucy's physical health. She had brought joy back into their lives and transformed their cold cargo ship into something that felt like a real home. "The kneading is my favorite part," Lucy announced as she pushed the dough around with her small fists. "It's like giving the bread a hug." "That's exactly what it is," Claire agreed. "When you put love into your cooking, people can taste it. That's why homemade food always tastes better than machine food." Jake stepped into the galley as the timer chimed for the bread in the oven. "Smells wonderful as always," he said. "The entire crew gathers near the galley when you're baking. I think you've created some addicts." Claire laughed as she removed golden loaves from the oven. "I noticed Crick's lingering in the corridor yesterday. I think the smells remind him of something even if he can't eat human food. Can we make extra bread for Ben today?" Lucy asked. "He said his favorite is the one with nuts and honey." "Of course we can," Claire replied. "Good cooks always take care of their friends." As if summoned by his name, Ben appeared in the doorway with a hopeful expression. "Please tell me there's fresh bread," he said dramatically. "The synthesized rations taste like cardboard now that I know what real food should be like." Claire handed him a warm slice with butter and watched his face light up with pleasure. Over the past weeks, she had learned each crew member's preferences. Ben loved anything with nuts, while Jake preferred simple whole grain bread. Even the alien crew members had begun requesting small samples just to experience the aromas. "Claire," Lucy said suddenly, "why don't you have a family? Don't you want little girls to bake with all the time?" The question caught Claire off guard, and Jake saw pain flicker across her face before she composed herself. "I travel too much for a family, sweetheart," she said carefully. "But I get to meet wonderful people like you on every ship." Jake sensed there was more to her story, but he did not push. Everyone carried wounds from their past, and Claire clearly had her own losses to bear. What mattered was how much she had helped his daughter, and how naturally she fit into their small crew. "Daddy," Lucy said with sudden excitement, "can Claire stay with us forever? She makes the best food and teaches me so many things." "Claire has her own life and work," Jake replied gently, though the idea appealed to him more than he wanted to admit. "We're lucky she's helping us for this journey. But I don't want her to leave," Lucy said with the honesty that only children possessed. "She makes everything better." Claire knelt down and hugged Lucy close. "I'm not going anywhere right now, sweetheart. We still have lots of baking to do together." That afternoon, Jake found Claire in the small hydroponics bay where she had started a herb garden using seeds from her supplies. She was teaching Lucy about different plants while they tended the tiny green shoots growing under artificial lights. "This is basil," Claire explained as Lucy gently watered a small pot. "It will make our bread taste even better when it grows bigger." "It smells like summer," Lucy said, sniffing the leaves carefully. "Very good," Claire praised. "Your nose is getting better at identifying flavors. That's an important skill for any cook." Jake cleared his throat to announce his presence. "Sorry to interrupt, but we're approaching the Proxima system. I wanted to let you know we might encounter other ships." Claire nodded, understanding the implication. Humans were not always welcome in contested space, and other species sometimes viewed their presence as threatening. "Should I prepare extra rations in case we need to leave quickly?" "Just be ready," Jake replied. "Most encounters are peaceful, but it's better to be prepared." That evening, after Lucy had gone to bed, Jake found Claire cleaning the galley for the next day's baking. They worked together in comfortable silence, washing dishes and organizing ingredients. Jake found himself studying her face in the soft light, wondering what sorrows lay behind her kind green eyes. "Lucy's question today about family," he said carefully. "I hope she didn't upset you." Claire paused in her wiping of the counter. "Children, ask honest questions. It's one of their best qualities. If you want to talk about it, I'm a good listener," Jake offered. "Sometimes sharing burdens makes them lighter." For a moment he thought she might open up, but then she smiled and shook her head. "Another time, perhaps. Tonight I just want to enjoy the peace and quiet." Jake understood and respected her boundaries. They finished cleaning in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the natural rhythm of two people who had learned to work together seamlessly. Later that night, Jake lay in his bunk, listening to the ship's engines and thinking about how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. Claire had brought more than just better nutrition to their ship. She had created warmth and community where before there had only been duty and survival. He thought about Lucy's innocent request for Claire to stay forever, and realized it was not just a child's wish. He was beginning to hope for the same thing, though he was afraid to examine those feelings too closely. Claire had made no promises about staying beyond their current contract, and he had no right to expect more. In her quarters, Claire sat at her small desk writing in a journal she had kept for years. She wrote about Lucy's progress and the satisfaction of watching a sick child bloom with proper nutrition and care. But she also wrote about Jake's quiet strength and the way he looked at his daughter with such fierce protective love. For the first time in years, Claire found herself wondering what it would be like to have a permanent home, instead of wandering from ship to ship. The New Dawn felt different from all the other vessels she had worked on. Here she was not just a hired specialist, but part of something that felt like a real family. She closed the journal and prepared for bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges as they entered the mining colonies. But tonight she felt content in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. Whatever the future held, she was grateful for this moment of peace and belonging among the stars. The alert klaxon woke Claire from deep sleep at 0400 ship time. She rolled out of her bunk and grabbed her emergency kit as red lights flashed throughout the corridor. After 3 weeks aboard the New Dawn, she knew the drill for potential combat. Situations. All crew to stations. Jake's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "We have incoming vessels on intercept course." Claire rushed to Lucy's cabin and found the little girl sitting up in bed looking frightened. "What's happening?" Lucy asked with wide blue eyes. "Just some visitors, sweetheart," Claire said calmly as she helped Lucy into her emergency suit. "Your daddy needs to talk to them first." They made their way to the bridge where Jake stood studying the tactical display with grim concentration. 3 large Saurian warships had dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. The reptilian vessels bristled with weapons and demanded immediate compliance. "This is Commander Vex of the Saurian Defense Fleet." A harsh voice crackled through the communication system. "Human vessel, you will submit to immediate inspection for biological contraband." Jake exchanged worried glances with Ben, who manned the navigation console. Biological contraband could mean anything from weapons to banned foods. The Saurians were notoriously suspicious of human ships carrying Earth-based materials. This is Captain Morrison of the cargo vessel New Dawn, Jake replied carefully. We carry standard mining equipment and supplies, no biological materials. Our sensors detect organic compounds consistent with biological weapons, Commander Vex responded. You will allow boarding parties or be destroyed. Claire felt her stomach drop as she realized what the Saurian scanners had detected. Her baking supplies included live yeast cultures and fermented ingredients that would register as active biological agents to alien sensors. To the reptilian military, her innocent bread ingredients looked like dangerous weapons. Captain, she said quietly, stepping forward. They're detecting my baking supplies, the yeast and fermentation cultures I use for bread making. Jake's face went pale as he understood the implications. Can you explain that to them? I can try, Claire replied, though she doubted the Saurians would understand the difference between bread yeast and bioweapons. Lucy tugged on Claire's sleeve with a frightened expression. Are the bad aliens going to hurt us? She whispered. No, honey, Claire said with more confidence than she felt. Sometimes different species just misunderstand each other. I'm going to help them understand that we're not dangerous. Jake opened the communication channel again. Commander Vex, we have a food specialist aboard who can explain the organic compounds you're detecting. They are cooking ingredients, not weapons. All human biological agents are potential weapons. The Saurian commander replied coldly. Prepare for boarding. Before Jake could respond, Lucy stepped forward and spoke into the communication system with the fearless honesty of a child. Mr. Alien, sir, she said in her clear young voice. Claire makes bread, not weapons. It tastes like sunshine and makes people happy. There was silence from the Saurian ships as Commander Vex processed this unexpected communication. Claire seized the opportunity and moved to the transmitter. Commander Vex, this is Claire Adams, the food specialist, she said respectfully. I understand your concern about biological agents. May I explain what you're detecting? You have 60 seconds, human, came the harsh reply. Claire took a deep breath and began explaining in simple, clear terms. The organic compounds your sensors detect are yeast cultures used for bread making. They are living microorganisms, but they only consume sugar and produce carbon dioxide gas. They cannot be weaponized or used to harm any living being. Human digestive processes are primitive, Commander Vex said dismissively. Why do you require living organisms for nutrition? Humans have used fermentation and yeast cultures for thousands of years, Claire explained patiently. The process breaks down complex carbohydrates and creates nutrients our bodies need to stay healthy. It's not about weapons, Commander. It's about survival. Demonstrate this process, the Saurian commander demanded suddenly. If your claims are true, show us this bread making. Claire looked at Jake, who nodded grimly. They had no choice but to comply with the alien demand. I can do that, Commander, but it takes time for bread to bake properly. You have one standard? Hour, Vex replied. Our boarding parties will observe and verify your claims. 20 minutes later, a Saurian shuttle docked with the New Dawn, and 6 armed reptilian soldiers marched aboard. Their leader was a tall, scaled warrior with cold yellow eyes who introduced himself as Lieutenant Koss. The aliens wore environmental suits and carried scanners that beeped constantly as they moved through the ship. Claire led them to the galley, where she had already begun preparing bread dough. Lucy stayed close beside her, refusing to be intimidated by the fierce-looking aliens. Jake and Ben flanked them protectively while the ship's alien crew members watched nervously from the corridors. These are the biological agents, Lieutenant Koss said, pointing his scanner at Claire's jar of active yeast starter. They show high metabolic activity. Yes, they do, Claire agreed calmly. That's exactly what makes them useful for baking. Watch what happens when I add them to flour and water. She demonstrated the process step by step, explaining how the yeast consumed sugars in the flour and produced gas bubbles that made the dough rise. The Saurian soldiers watched with fascination as the seemingly dead ingredients came alive under Claire's hands. The microorganisms are contained within the food matrix, Lieutenant Koss observed as he scanned the rising dough. They cannot survive outside this specific environment. Exactly, Claire said with relief. They're completely harmless to any species that doesn't eat human food. Even if someone tried to weaponize them, they would die immediately outside their food source. Lucy, who had been quietly watching, suddenly spoke up. "Would you like to smell the bread when it's done?" she asked the lieutenant with innocent curiosity. "It smells really nice even if you can't eat it." The tall saurian looked down at the small human child with something that might have been amusement. "Young human, your species' customs are most unusual." "My name is Lucy," she replied politely. "What's your name?" "I am Lieutenant Koss of the 3rd Battle Squadron," the alien said formally. "That's a nice name," Lucy said with a bright smile. "Do you have children, Lieutenant Koss?" The question clearly surprised the saurian warrior. "My species does not form emotional attachments to offspring as humans do," he replied stiffly. "That's sad," Lucy said with genuine sympathy. "Children are the best part of being grown up." Claire watched the exchange with amazement as Lucy's natural warmth seemed to affect even the battle-hardened alien soldier. When the bread finished baking, she removed golden loaves from the oven and the wonderful aroma filled the galley. "The chemical compounds are non-toxic," Lieutenant Koss reported after scanning the finished bread. "The biological agents have been neutralized by the heating process." "Would you like to try a small piece?" Claire offered, knowing the aliens could not digest human food safely. "Just to verify it's harmless." Lieutenant Koss hesitated, then took a tiny piece of bread and subjected it to intensive scanning. His equipment confirmed that the bread contained no dangerous compounds or active biological agents. "This is indeed food, not weapons," he announced to his squad. "The humans speak truthfully about their purposes." Commander Vex's voice crackled through the communication system. "Lieutenant, report your findings." "Sir, the organic compounds are food preparation materials," Koss replied. "The humans use primitive but effective biological processes to create nutrition. There is no weapons threat." There was a long pause before Commander Vex responded. "Very well. Human vessel, you may proceed, but be aware that other fleets may not be as understanding of your unusual food requirements." The saurian boarding party prepared to leave, but Lieutenant Koss paused at the galley entrance. "Young Lucy," he said formally, "your species' custom of caring for offspring is not entirely without merit." Lucy beamed at the alien soldier. "Thank you, Lieutenant Koss. I hope you have a nice day." After the saurians departed, Jake gathered his crew on the bridge. "That was too close," he said grimly. "If they hadn't been willing to listen, we could have been destroyed over bread ingredients." "But they did listen," Claire pointed out. "Sometimes understanding just takes patience and the right explanation." "And Lucy," Ben added with admiration. "I think she charmed that alien warrior." Lucy giggled, happily. "He was nice once you got to know him. Maybe aliens aren't so scary after all." Jake looked at Claire with new respect and something deeper. She had handled the crisis with calm courage and protected not just herself, but his daughter and entire crew. Her quick thinking and patient explanations had prevented a disaster that could have ended all their lives. 3 days after the saurian encounter, Jake Morrison found himself standing in the hydroponics bay watching Claire teach Lucy about earth plants. The small space had been transformed from a sterile growing chamber into something that resembled a garden from the home world. Green shoots of herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows under artificial sunlight, while the sweet smell of growing things filled the air. "This is oregano," Claire explained as Lucy gently touched the small leaves. "It grows wild on hillsides back on Earth and makes pizza taste wonderful." "What's pizza?" Lucy asked with the endless curiosity of a 6-year-old. Claire's eyes lit up with the joy of sharing knowledge. "It's bread with tomato sauce and cheese baked until it's hot and bubbly. Maybe we can try making some when the tomato plants get bigger." Jake leaned against the doorframe, content to watch the two most important people in his life work together. Over the past month, Claire had become much more than a hired food specialist. She had brought warmth and life to every corner of the ship, turning their utilitarian vessel into something that felt like a real home. "Daddy, look," Lucy called excitedly. "The basil is big enough to use for cooking now." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Jake replied, stepping into the small garden space. "Claire is teaching you so many things. She knows everything about growing food," Lucy said with obvious admiration. "She says people used to grow all their food in dirt before they had machines." It's called farming, Claire said with a gentle laugh. And yes, humans did it for thousands of years before we learned to travel between stars. Jake watched Claire show Lucy how to harvest the herb leaves without damaging the plant. Her movements were patient and precise, as if she had taught children many times before. The sight filled him with emotions he had been trying to ignore for weeks. "Claire," he said carefully, "could I speak with you privately after Lucy's bedtime tonight?" "Of course, Captain," she replied, though he caught a flicker of concern in her green eyes. That evening, after Lucy was tucked into bed with a story about brave space explorers, Jake found Claire in the galley preparing dough for the next day's bread. They worked together in comfortable silence, cleaning dishes and organizing ingredients until the space was ready for morning baking. "You wanted to talk?" Claire said finally, settling into one of the small chairs around the galley table. Jake poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot Claire always kept brewing and sat across from her. For a moment, he struggled to find the right words for feelings he had been denying for weeks. "What you did with the Saurians," he began. "That took incredible courage. You saved all our lives with your quick thinking." "I was just protecting Lucy," Claire said simply, "and the rest of the crew, of course." "It was more than that," Jake insisted. "You stood between armed alien soldiers and my daughter without hesitation. That's not something a hired specialist does. That's what family does." Claire looked down at her coffee cup and Jake saw her hands tremble slightly. "Captain, I think you should know something about my past, about why I don't have a family of my own." Jake waited patiently as Claire gathered her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet and filled with old pain. "I was married once," she said. "My husband David and I had a bakery on Terra Nova colony. We were trying to have children and had just learned I was pregnant when the Chithan raiders attacked." Jake felt his heart clench with sympathy. Chithan pirates were among the most vicious in known space, and Terra Nova had suffered several devastating raids 5 years ago. "David tried to protect our home," Claire continued with tears threatening her voice. "He died defending the bakery and I lost the baby from the stress and injuries. Everything I had built was destroyed in one night." "Claire, I'm so sorry." Jake said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You don't have to tell me this." "Yes, I do," she replied, gripping his fingers tightly. "Because what's happening here scares me, Jake. The way Lucy looks at me like I'm her mother. The way you look at me like I'm something precious. I can't bear to lose another family." Jake saw the fear and longing warring in her eyes and realized she was falling for them just as hard as they were falling for her. The knowledge filled him with hope and terror in equal measure. "You won't lose us," he said with quiet conviction. "This ship is dangerous work, but we've survived this long by being careful and smart." "Your wife died in a mining accident," Claire pointed out gently. "Space is never truly safe, no matter how careful we are." Jake nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "Maria's death nearly destroyed me," he admitted. "For months after, I could barely function. If not for Lucy, I probably would have given up completely." "How do you bear the fear of losing her?" Claire asked. "How do you wake up every day knowing that something could happen to the person you love most?" "Because the alternative is not living at all," Jake replied. "Yes, we might lose each other someday, but the love we share today is worth any risk tomorrow might bring." Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands on the table. "Lucy asked me today if I was going to be her new mommy," she said finally. "I didn't know what to tell her." "What did you want to tell her?" Jake asked gently. "That I love her more than I thought possible," Claire whispered. "That being with you both feels like coming home after years of wandering lost, but also that I'm terrified of getting attached and losing everything again." Jake lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles softly. "I understand that fear better than you know. But Claire, you've already become part of our family, whether you admit it or not. Lucy lights up when she sees you, and so do I." "Jake," Claire began, but he continued speaking. "I know this is fast and complicated," he said. "I know you have every reason to protect your heart after what you've been through, but don't let fear rob us of something beautiful before we've had a chance to see where it leads." Claire looked into his brown eyes and saw the same vulnerability she felt reflected there. This strong, capable man who commanded a starship was just as scared as she was of risking his heart again. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I've been alone for so long I've forgotten how to be part of something bigger than myself." "We'll figure it out together," Jake said, standing and pulling her into his arms. "No pressure, no demands. Just take it one day at a time and see what develops." Claire allowed herself to relax into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished for the first time in years. Jake was warm and solid against her, and she could hear his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "Lucy will be so happy," she murmured against his chest. "What about you?" he asked softly. "Will you be happy?" Claire tilted her head back to meet his gaze and saw hope and love shining in his eyes. "I think I might be," she said with wonder. "I think I might actually be happy." Jake leaned down and kissed her gently, a soft, sweet promise of possibilities yet to come. When they broke apart, Claire was smiling through tears of joy rather than sorrow. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we go to bed, and tomorrow we keep taking care of each other," Jake replied. "Just like we've been doing all along, except now we don't have to pretend it's just professional." As they turned off the galley lights and made their way to their separate quarters, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time since losing her first family, she dared to hope that love and happiness might be possible again among the stars. The distress signal reached the new dawn at 06:30 ship time, while Claire was teaching Lucy how to braid sweet bread in the galley. The automated message played through the ship's communication system with desperate urgency that made Jake's blood run cold. "This is Colonel Sarah Martinez of Harmony Station." The recorded voice crackled with static. "We are under attack by Vorthan forces. Civilian population trapped. Requesting immediate assistance from any human vessels in range." Jake rushed to the bridge where Ben was already analyzing the signal's origin. The message had come from a human agricultural colony 3 days away at maximum speed. According to their records, Harmony Station housed over 2,000 civilians, including hundreds of children. "The Vorthans are a militant species that considers humans an invasive plague," Ben reported grimly. "If they've attacked Harmony Station, they won't leave survivors." Jake stared at the tactical display showing their current position relative to the colony. They could reach Harmony Station in time to help, but it would mean taking his ship and crew directly into a combat zone against overwhelming odds. Captain Crix, the Saurian engineer, spoke up from his console. "Vorthan battle tactics involve complete extermination of target populations. Intervention would be suicide." Claire appeared on the bridge carrying Lucy, who looked frightened by the urgent activity around her. "What's happening?" Claire asked quietly. Jake explained the situation while weighing their options. The New Dawn was a cargo vessel, not a warship. They had light defensive weapons and minimal armor against an enemy that specialized in planetary assault. Taking his family into such danger went against every protective instinct he possessed. "Daddy, are people in trouble?" Lucy asked with the innocent concern of a child who had learned that the galaxy could be dangerous. "Yes, sweetheart," Jake replied honestly. "There are families like ours who need help." Claire set Lucy down gently and looked directly into Jake's eyes. "We have to go," she said quietly but with absolute conviction. Jake felt his heart stop. "Claire, do you understand what you're asking? The Vorthans don't take prisoners. If we get caught in that system, we'll all die." "I understand perfectly," Claire replied. "But there are children on that station, Jake. Hundreds of them according to the message. How can we listen to their calls for help and just fly away?" "Because I won't risk Lucy's life for strangers," Jake said harshly. "I've already lost one family. I won't lose another." Claire knelt down to Lucy's level and spoke gently. "Sweetheart, if you saw a little girl who was scared and hungry, would you help her even if it was dangerous?" Lucy nodded seriously. "Mommy Maria used to say helping people is what makes us human." The mention of his dead wife hit Jake like a physical blow. Maria had indeed believed that humans had a duty to protect each other, especially in the harsh environment of space. She would have demanded they help Harmony Station regardless of the personal cost. "The child speaks wisdom," came an unexpected voice from the bridge entrance. "Lieutenant Voth," The quiet Saurian engineer rarely spoke during crew meetings, but now he stood watching them with his reptilian eyes fixed on Lucy. My species values logic over emotion, Voth continued. But I have observed humans for many years. Your strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from your willingness to sacrifice for others. It is why other species both fear and respect you. Ben checked the navigation computers and looked up with grim determination. We can make it in 72 hours if we push the engines hard. That should put us there before the Vorthons finish their assault. This is insane, Jake said, running his hands through his hair. We're a cargo ship with minimal weapons against military vessels designed for planetary bombardment. Claire stood and took his hands in hers, looking directly into his eyes. Jake, when I lost my family on Terra Nova, other ships could have tried to help, but they didn't. They made the logical choice to protect themselves, and my husband died alone defending our home. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I've regretted not being able to help those other families ever since. This time I can help. We can help. Isn't that what humans do? Isn't that what makes us worth preserving in this galaxy? Jake saw the pain of old losses and the hope for redemption shining in her green eyes. He also saw that she had already made her choice regardless of what he decided. Claire would help those families even if it meant her own death. Daddy, Lucy said quietly, tugging on his uniform jacket. The scared children need us. Jake looked down at his daughter's serious face and saw Maria's unwavering moral courage reflected there. His wife had always believed that humans survived in hostile space not through superior firepower, but through their commitment to protecting each other. Ben, he said finally, set course for Harmony Station maximum speed. Send a message to any other human ships in the area. Maybe we won't be going alone. Aye, Captain, Ben replied with relief. Plotting course now. Krixvoth. Jake called to his alien engineers. I know this isn't your fight. If you want to take the shuttle and leave at the next station, I'll understand. The two Saurians exchanged looks before Krix spoke for both of them. Captain Morrison, you are pack leader. We follow where you lead even into battle. Voth nodded agreement. Besides, he added with what might have been humor, someone must protect the human breadmaker. The galaxy needs more beings who create rather than destroy. Over the next 3 days as they raced toward Harmony Station, the crew prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Claire worked tirelessly in the galley preparing emergency rations and medical supplies, while teaching Lucy about courage and sacrifice. Why do grown-ups have to make such hard choices? Lucy asked while helping Claire package medical bread designed to provide maximum nutrition for injured people. Because that's how we take care of each other, Claire explained. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but we do it anyway because someone has to. Are you scared? Lucy asked with innocent directness. Claire paused in her work and considered the question honestly. Yes, sweetheart, I'm very scared, but I'm also proud to be with people brave enough to help others. Jake spent long hours on the bridge coordinating with the 3 other human ships that had responded to the distress call. It wasn't much of a rescue fleet, but it was better than facing the Vorthons alone. On the final night before reaching Harmony, Station Jake found Claire in their makeshift garden checking on the plants one last time. She was memorizing every detail as if she might never see them again. Having second thoughts, he asked gently. Never, she replied firmly. But I wanted to see our little piece of earth one more time. Jake pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Claire whispered against his chest. I love you, Jake Morrison, and I love your incredible daughter. I love you, too, Claire Adams, he replied, kissing the top of her head. Now let's go save some families. The rescue of Harmony Station had taken 18 hours of desperate fighting, but somehow the small fleet of human cargo ships had succeeded. Jake stood in the New Dawn's cargo bay watching Claire distribute fresh bread to the last group of refugee children. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but she smiled warmly at each small face as if they were the most important people in the galaxy. 237 colonists were crammed into spaces designed for freight, Families huddled together, on makeshift bedding while children played quietly in whatever space they could find. The ship's corridors echoed with multiple conversations. In the cramped but grateful survivors shared their stories of survival. "Miss Claire, this bread tastes like home," said a little boy named Tommy who had lost his parents in the attack. "My mama used to make bread, but not as good as yours." Claire knelt down and hugged the orphaned child close. "Your mama would be very proud of how brave you've been," she said gently. "And when we get you somewhere safe, I'll teach you to make bread just like she did." Jake watched this interaction from across the cargo bay, feeling his heart swell with love and pride. During the battle, Claire had insisted on staying in the galley preparing emergency food for the expected refugees. While explosions rocked the ship around them, she had calmly baked dozens of loaves, knowing that frightened people would need comfort food more than standard rations. Lucy appeared at Jake's side carrying a small doll she had insisted on giving to one of the refugee children. "Daddy," she said quietly, "are we really going to take all these people to New Terra Colony?" "Yes, sweetheart," Jake replied. "It will take 2 weeks to get there, but they'll be safe once we arrive." "Good," Lucy said with satisfaction. "Claire says taking care of people is what families do." The word family hit Jake with unexpected force. Over the past month, Claire had become so integral to their lives that he could not imagine existence without her. But their current contract would end when they delivered the refugees, and he had no idea if she would stay or return to her wandering life among the stations. That evening, after the refugees had settled into sleep cycles throughout the ship, Jake found Claire in the small observation lounge looking out at the stars. She sat curled in one of the chairs with a cup of tea steaming in her hands, and exhaustion written in every line of her body. "You should be resting," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I can't sleep yet," she replied softly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those Vorthan ships firing on the civilian shelters. If we had arrived even 1 hour later, hundreds more would have died." Jake reached over and took her free hand. "But we didn't arrive late. We saved them, Claire. Your insistence that we help made the difference between life and death for those families." Claire turned to look at him with tears shining in her green eyes. "When I saw all those children in the shelters, I thought about Tommy and how scared he must have been. I thought about Lucy and how I would feel if something happened to her." "Claire," Jake said carefully, "I need to tell you something important." She set down her tea and turned to face him fully. "What is it?" Jake took a deep breath and spoke the words that had been building in his heart for weeks. "I love you, not just as a crew member or even as a friend. I love you completely and desperately, and I want you to stay with us permanently." Claire's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like joy. "Jake," she whispered. "I know it's fast," he continued quickly. "I know we've only known each other for a month and that your life is complicated. But these weeks with you have shown me what happiness looks like again. You've made Lucy bloom like a flower and turned our ship into a real home." "I love you too," Claire said so quietly he almost missed it. "I love you and Lucy more than I ever thought possible." "Then stay," Jake said, leaning forward urgently. "Not as a hired specialist, but as family. Marry me, Claire. Be Lucy's mother and my wife and help us build something beautiful together." Before Claire could answer, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. "Are you asking Claire to marry us, Daddy?" They turned to see Lucy standing in the entrance wearing her favorite yellow pajamas and clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her blue eyes were bright with excitement rather than sleepiness. "Lucy, what are you doing awake?" Jake asked, though he was smiling at his daughter's perfect timing. "I heard voices and came to find you," Lucy said, climbing onto Claire's lap with the easy familiarity of a child who felt completely loved. "Are you really going to be my new mommy, Claire?" Claire wrapped her arms around Lucy and looked from her to Jake with wonder in her eyes. "Would you like that, sweetheart? Would you like me to stay and be part of your family?" "Yes, yes, yes," Lucy said, bouncing with excitement. "I've been wishing for a mommy who makes good food and tells stories and hugs me when I'm scared. I've been wishing for that too," Claire said with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Oh, Lucy, I would love nothing more than to be your mommy." Jake felt his own eyes fill with tears as he watched the two people he loved most embrace each other. "Is that a yes to my proposal?" he asked with a shaky laugh. "Yes, Captain Morrison," Claire said, looking at him over Lucy's head. "Yes to everything. Yes to staying, and yes to marriage, and yes to building a family together among the stars." Lucy squealed with delight and launched herself at Jake for a three-way hug that threatened to topple them all from the chairs. They laughed and cried and held each other as if they would never let go. Their celebration was interrupted by Ben's voice over the communication system. "Captain, to the bridge immediately. We have incoming ships." Jake's blood ran cold. They were still 2 days from the nearest safe system, and the New Dawn was overloaded with refugees. If hostile forces had found them, there was nowhere to run. "Stay here with Lucy," he told Claire as he headed for the bridge. "No," Claire said, standing with Lucy in her arms. "We're family now. We face whatever comes together." The bridge was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Ben pointed at the tactical display showing dozens of ships dropping out of hyperspace around them. But these were not the sleek warships Jake had expected. They were massive vessels of unknown design that dwarfed even the largest human battleships. "They're not responding to hail attempts," Ben reported. "But they're not targeting us either. They seem to be just watching." "What species builds ships that size?" Jake asked, staring at the display in amazement. "Unknown, Captain," Ben replied. "I've never seen anything like them." Suddenly, every screen on the bridge activated simultaneously, showing the image of a being that defied easy description. It appeared to be made of living crystal with faceted surfaces that reflected light in impossible ways. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the ship's hull rather than the communication system. "Human vessels, you will cease movement and prepare for inspection," the entity said. "Your species has been designated a galactic threat level 7. Immediate containment protocols are now in effect." Jake felt Claire move protectively in front of Lucy as the magnitude of their situation became clear. They had rescued the refugees from one enemy only to encounter something far more powerful and completely unknown. "This is Captain Morrison," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are transporting civilian refugees to safety. We pose no threat to anyone." "All human activity poses a threat," the crystal being replied coldly. "Your species demonstrates dangerous behavioral patterns that must be contained before they spread to other civilizations." Jake looked at Claire and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. After everything they had been through together, they might lose each other to forces beyond their understanding or control. But at least this time they would face the unknown as a family united by love rather than alone in the darkness. The massive crystal ships held the small human fleet motionless in space for 3 hours, while their mysterious occupants conducted deep scans of every vessel. Jake stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, with Claire and Lucy beside him watching alien boarding shuttles approach. The beings that emerged defied everything he thought he knew about intelligent life. The crystalline entities moved like living sculptures of light and shadow. Their leader introduced itself as Prime Resonance, Zeth of the Galactic Stability Council. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from the air itself rather than any visible mouth. "Human Captain Morrison," Zeth intoned with a voice like distant thunder. "Your species has been under observation for 2 standard cycles. The data is disturbing." "What exactly do you find disturbing about us?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice respectful despite his fear. "You spread chaos wherever you travel," Zeth replied. "Other species alter their behavior patterns after contact with humans. Trade agreements become less profitable. Military hierarchies develop inefficiencies. Entire cultures begin prioritizing emotional satisfaction over logical optimization." Claire stepped forward, still holding Lucy's hand. "With respect, Prime Resonance, those sound like positive changes to me." "You would think so, human," Zeth said, turning its crystalline attention to her. "You are Claire Adams, the food preparation specialist. Our analysis indicates you are a primary vector for human cultural contamination." "I bake bread," Claire said simply. "How can that threaten galactic stability?" "Observe," Zeth commanded, and suddenly holographic displays filled the air around them. The images showed scenes from across the galaxy. Saurian trading posts where reptilian merchants had begun offering food prepared with care, rather than pure efficiency. Cheat and hive ships where workers created art during rest periods instead of maintenance calculations. Vorthan military bases, where commanders paused to consider civilian casualties before ordering attacks. All of these behavioral modifications can be traced to contact with human vessels, Zeth explained. Your species spreads a dangerous ideology that prioritizes individual emotional states over collective efficiency. Is that really so terrible? Claire asked with growing boldness. Those beings look happier, more fulfilled. Isn't that worth something? Happiness is irrelevant, Zeth declared. Only optimal resource allocation and maximum productivity ensure galactic stability. Lucy, who had been quietly listening, suddenly stepped forward with the fearless innocence of a child. Mr. Crystal Person, she said politely, are you happy? The question seemed to surprise the entity. Happiness is not applicable to our existence, small human. That's really sad, Lucy said with genuine sympathy. Being happy is the best part of being alive. Emotional satisfaction leads to inefficiency, Zeth replied, but something in its voice seemed less certain. Claire knelt down to Lucy's level and spoke loud enough for the aliens to hear. Sweetheart, why don't you show Prime Resonance Zeth how we make people happy on our ship? Okay, Lucy said, brightening immediately. She turned to the towering crystal being with complete confidence. Would you like to try some of Claire's bread? It tastes like sunshine and makes everyone feel better. We do not consume organic matter, Zeth said stiffly. You don't have to eat it, Lucy explained patiently. You can just smell it. The smell makes people happy too. Before anyone could object, Lucy tugged on Claire's hand. Can we make bread for the crystal people, Claire? They seem very sad. Claire looked at Jake, who nodded despite the surreal nature of the situation. I suppose I could prepare some bread if Prime Resonance Zeth would permit it. This is highly irregular, Zeth said after a long pause. But we will observe this human food preparation ritual for scientific analysis. 20 minutes later, the New Dawn's galley was filled with crystalline entities watching Claire and Lucy bake bread with the same intense focus they might apply to studying a dangerous weapon. The aliens' translucent forms caught and reflected the warm light from the oven, creating dancing patterns on the walls. The organic compounds are undergoing controlled decomposition, one entity observed as Claire kneaded dough. The process appears deliberately inefficient. That's the point, Claire explained patiently. Good bread can't be rushed. It needs time and care to develop properly. But why do you include the small human in the process? Another alien asked. Her motor functions are clearly suboptimal for precise measurements. Claire smiled as Lucy carefully measured flour with intense concentration. Because cooking together creates bonds between people. It teaches patience and cooperation and shows that we care about each other. Emotional bonding reduces individual efficiency, Zeth stated. Does it? Claire asked as she guided Lucy's small hands in shaping loaves. Lucy is learning mathematics through measuring ingredients. She's developing fine motor skills through kneading dough, and she's gaining confidence by contributing to our family's well-being. How is that inefficient? As the bread baked, the wonderful aroma filled the ship's corridors. Refugee families began gathering near the galley, drawn by the comforting smell. Children pressed their faces against the doorway while adults smiled for the first time since the attack on their colony. The scent triggers positive responses in human nervous systems, one crystalline scientist noted with what might have been surprise. It does more than that, Claire said, removing golden loaves from the oven. It connects them to memories of home and family. It reminds them that someone cares enough to make something beautiful just for them. She cut thick slices of warm bread and offered them to the refugee families. Jake watched the aliens observe this simple act of sharing with what appeared to be growing confusion. The food provider receives no additional compensation for this distribution, Zeth noted. Her caloric expenditure exceeds her nutritional intake from the process. I don't do it for compensation, Claire replied. I do it because these people need care and comfort. Because children should never go hungry when I have the ability to feed them. Young Tommy, the orphaned boy from Harmony Station, approached Claire shyly. Miss Claire, he said quietly. Thank you for the bread, it makes me miss my mama less. Claire knelt down and hugged the child close. You're very welcome, sweetheart. Your mama would be proud of how brave you've been. Jake saw several of the crystalline entities recoil as if struck by a physical force. Prime resonance, one of them said urgently. The emotional resonance levels are approaching critical parameters. I am aware, Zeth replied, but its voice seemed different somehow, less cold and mechanical. Lucy approached the towering alien leader with a fresh slice of bread held out like an offering. I know you can't eat it, she said earnestly. But would you like to hold it? Sometimes holding warm things makes people feel better. Zeth stared down at the small human child for a long moment. Slowly, tentatively, it extended one crystalline appendage toward the bread. The moment alien crystal touched human food, something extraordinary happened. Light pulsed through Zeth's form in waves of color that had no names. The other entities gasped in harmonics that resonated through the ship's hull. For several seconds, the alien leader stood perfectly still, as if experiencing something completely foreign to its existence. What is this sensation? Zeth whispered finally. That's warmth, Lucy said helpfully. And the feeling of someone caring about you. It is highly inefficient, Zeth said, but made no move to release the bread. Maybe, Claire said gently. But how does it make you feel? I do not understand the question, Zeth replied, though its voice carried uncertainty. Do you like the feeling? Lucy asked with a child's directness. Does it make you want to smile? Zeth was silent for a long time as colors continued to pulse through its crystalline form. Finally, it spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. It makes me want to create rather than analyze, to build rather than optimize, to care. That's what humans call love, Claire said softly. It's not efficient, but it's what makes life worth living. The other crystalline entities watched their leader with what appeared to be alarm. Prime resonance, one said urgently. Your logic patterns are showing severe deviation. Yes, Zeth said with something that might have been wonder. For the first time in my existence, I understand why other species resist optimization. This feeling is more valuable than efficiency. Slowly, carefully, Zeth handed the bread back to Lucy. Small human, it said formally. Your species is indeed dangerous. You threaten the very foundation of galactic order by proving that logic alone is insufficient for true existence. Jake felt his heart stop, but Zeth continued speaking. However, the entity said, perhaps it is time for galactic order to evolve. Your demonstration of care and connection has shown us that efficiency without compassion is merely elaborate death. The alien leader turned to address its crew. Cancel containment protocols. Designate humans as teachers rather than threats. The galaxy has much to learn from their dangerous capacity for love. As the crystalline ships prepared to depart, Zeth approached Claire one final time. Food preparer Claire Adams, it said formally. Will you accept a request? Of course, Claire replied. Teach others what you have shown us. Spread your dangerous gift of caring throughout the galaxy. Show other species that emotional bonds can create strength rather than weakness. Claire looked at Jake and Lucy, then back at the towering alien.